You are alive. You do not know yet what to do with that. You are on the deck of the Carpathia, and the sun is coming up. For the first time since before everything happened, the sky at the eastern edge of the world turning from black to a gray that is not warmth yet, but is the promise of warmth. The light arriving the way light always arrives. Slowly, without announcement, indifferent to what the night has contained. The deck around you is covered in people. Some of them are sleeping where they sat down, wrapped in whatever the Carpathia's crew could give them. Blankets, coats, tablecloths from the dining room. Anything with warmth in it. Some of them are awake and silent, looking at the horizon with the look of people whose eyes are operating, but whose minds are somewhere else entirely, somewhere back in the dark, somewhere in the water. Some of them are crying. Some of them are not crying, and will not cry for a very long time, because what happened is too large for the body to process through tears. Because tears require a certain containment of the thing, and the thing will not be contained. Not yet, not for days or weeks or possibly years. You are sitting with your back against the Carpathia's aft funnel casing, which is warm. The residual heat of the boilers traveling up through the steel and into the metal at your back. And the warmth of it is the most real thing in the world right now. More real than the light coming up. More real than the voices around you. More real than the water you can see over the rail, flat and dark and covered in the last of the debris. You are alive. The ship is not. And the question that is going to follow you off this deck and down the gangplank and into whatever comes after. The question that is going to be there every morning when you wake up for the rest of your life is already forming, already taking its shape in the place behind your ribs where the large questions live. Why you? Why not them? This is the last story in the Titanic series, and it is different from the others. The others gave you a name, a rank, a room on the ship where you belonged, a specific role in the night of April 14th and 15th, 1912, a place in the sequence of events from which the whole disaster could be seen from one particular angle. You were the man in the crow's nest who saw something in the dark and reached for the phone. You were the engineer who kept the lights on from the deepest part of the ship. You were the wireless operator whose key never stopped moving until the power gave out. You were the officer who turned the lifeboat around. You were the woman who opened the gate. You were the man who went down like a gentleman, dressed for the occasion, cigar in hand. This story does not give you a name. This story gives you only this. You survived. You are on the Carpathia. The sun is coming up, and between the deck you are sitting on and the night you have just come through, there are things you saw and heard and felt and cannot yet fully hold. Things that are going to take years to settle into something you can live alongside. You do not know yet that you will be able to live alongside them. Right now, with the funnel warm at your back and the light coming up, you do not know very much at all. But you remember the night. You remember it with a clarity that is almost violent. The specific hyperclarity of a mind that has been running on fear and cold and the absolute necessity of staying alive. A clarity that will fade over years into something softer and more bearable, but that right now, on this deck, is the entire content of your consciousness. You remember everything. Yet in this story, you are the survivor. You have no name. You have no class, no cabin number, no specific seat at any particular table. You are the one who made it. And this is what you remember. You remember boarding, April 10th, Southampton. The air cold and sharp with the smell of coal smoke and salt water, and the particular industrial smell of a working port, oil and rope and the iron smell of the cranes, the smell of a place that exists for the purpose of sending things away across the water. You remember the crowd on the dock, the size of it, the thousands of people come to see the departure of the largest ship ever built, come to watch her go the way people come to watch anything that exceeds the ordinary scale of things. because the mind requires occasional evidence that the world is larger than it usually appears. But you remember looking up at her from the dock. The Titanic from the quayside in Southampton is something that defies the categories you have for large things. She is not large the way a building is large, because a building is fixed, anchored to the earth, its size a given and permanent fact. The Titanic is large in a way that moves. She sits in the water with a lightness that her dimensions make impossible. 88 feet of hull above the waterline, 4 funnels going up into the sky above that. And she is going to cross the Atlantic, is going to take this impossible quantity of steel and wood and glass and furniture and food and people and move it across 3,000 miles of ocean in under a week. You stood on the dock and you looked at her and you thought, nothing can happen to something this large. This is the thought that everyone on the dock was having. This is the thought that everyone on the ship was having. It is the thought that the Titanic was built to produce. That was part of what she was for. The reassurance of her scale. The specific comfort of being inside something so large that the outside world, the weather, the ocean, the darkness, cannot reach you. You paid for that comfort. You boarded that ship, and for 4 days the comfort held. For 4 days nothing happened. The sea was flat. The sky was clear. The food arrived on schedule and the ship ran on time, and the ocean, which has been taking ships for as long as there have been ships, was patient. The ocean waited. You remember standing on the deck on the second day out, watching the wake trailing behind the ship, and the white line of disturbed water, marking the path you had already traveled, and dissolving into the flat sea behind you, and thinking, I am going somewhere. I am crossing something. On the other side of this water is a different life, and the ship is taking me to it. You stood there until the cold drove you back inside. You did not know then that the cold outside the ship was the same cold that was going to be inside you 3 days later. You went back in. You closed the door behind you. You did not know most of the people on this ship. 2,224 people, and the world of the crossing was divided into smaller worlds by class and deck and the specific social gravity that pulls people toward their own kind. You ate with some of them, walked with some of them on the deck in the afternoons, exchanged the brief cordial acknowledgments of people sharing a vessel for a week who will likely never see each other again after New York. Ships produce a particular kind of intimacy, the temporary closeness of people removed from their ordinary contexts, people who are neither fully in the life they left, nor fully in the life they are going to. People suspended in the Atlantic between one thing and another. You remember faces. You remember a man in the dining saloon on the first evening, first class, from his bearing and his clothes and the way the steward addressed him. The bearing of a man who had been wealthy long enough that the wealth had become invisible, had simply become the way things were, the way the world arranged itself. He was watching his wife across the table with an expression that contained something you could not fully read. Not unhappiness exactly, something more complex. The expression of a man who has everything and is in the process of understanding that everything and the thing he actually wants are not the same category. You watched him for a moment. He did not see you. You went back to your own table. You remember a man at the piano in the first-class lounge on the second evening. He was not performing, or not officially, not for an audience. Yet he was playing the way people play when the music is for themselves rather than for the room, leaning into the instrument with a concentration that closed the room out. His hands moving across the keys with the ease of a body doing something it has done so many thousands of times that doing it has become a form of thinking rather than a performance. The tune was something gentle, not the orchestral pieces the band played at dinner, something smaller, a melody that seemed to have no particular origin, that might have been composed or might have been found in the moment. The specific music of a musician, alone with an instrument at the end of a day. You stopped in the doorway and listened. You did not go in. He did not see you. You carried the melody with you for the rest of the day, the way a tune will lodge in the mind and surface at intervals, unbidden, a small piece of someone else's inner life that you accidentally collected. You remember a woman in a corridor on the third day, F deck, near the forward stairwell, a part of the ship you did not usually pass through. She was sitting on a trunk in the corridor with a child asleep across her lap. A girl of perhaps 3 or 4, completely and deeply asleep in the specific total way of small children. Her face slack and soft against her mother's coat. The mother was awake, looking down the corridor at nothing, her hand moving slowly across the child's back with the automatic, inexhaustible rhythm of someone who has been doing that motion for so long. It has become the resting state of her hands. She looked up when you passed. You nodded. She nodded. You kept walking. You thought about them for the rest of the afternoon, the woman and the sleeping child, the hand moving in circles. Sunday, April 14th, begins the way the other days have begun. The morning service in the first-class dining saloon. Captain Smith presiding. The hymns sung with the slightly self-conscious fervor of people doing a thing because it is done on ships on Sunday mornings, rather than because they are moved by the particular hymn, the ceremony of it, the ritual. You went because it seemed like the right thing to do. You found a seat near the back and you sang the words you remembered from childhood, and you looked at the captain. Smith was 62 years old, and his face had been shaped by 40 years of the sea into something that was beyond ordinary descriptors of age. Not old, not young, simply weathered in the specific way of faces that have spent decades looking at weather, that have learned to read wind and cloud and sea surface the way other faces learn to read rooms and conversations. He led the service with a steadiness that was the steadiness of long practice, of a man who has done this particular thing on many ships on many Sundays, and there was something in his bearing that was, you noticed it without knowing why you noticed it, something that was carrying more weight than the occasion required, as if the certainty that his face was trained to project was costing him more than usual. After the service, you walked past him in the corridor outside. He nodded to you. You nodded back. His eyes, when they met yours for the fraction of a second of the exchange, contained something that you filed away without examining, the look of a man whose mind is not entirely in the corridor, whose attention is divided between the courtesy of the moment and something else that will not leave him alone. You did not think about it again until later. Later, you thought about it constantly. The afternoon passed in the ordinary way of an afternoon at sea, reading, walking the deck, the cold air and the extraordinary flatness of the water, the sky that had been clear all day, remaining clear, the stars coming out as the light faded with a density and brilliance that only the open ocean produces, far from any land-based light, the Milky Way visible overhead as a smear of cold fire. At dinner, you were cheerful. Everyone was cheerful. It was the last night of the crossing, New York the day after tomorrow, and the dinner was extraordinary, the dining saloon full, and the collective goodwill of people, nearing the end of a successful voyage, producing a warmth in the room that had nothing to do with the temperature. You ate well. You went to bed at 10:30. You were asleep by 11. You slept for 40 minutes. At 20 minutes to midnight, you woke to a sound you have never heard before and will never be able to describe adequately afterward. A sound that was not the ship, that was something the ship was not supposed to encounter. A long, grinding shudder that came up from below through the mattress and into your back, and reached into your sleep, and took hold of something at the very base of you. The animal part. The part that is older than language and reason. The part that says wrong, wrong, this is wrong, before you are even fully conscious. You dressed quickly, not because you understood what had happened. You did not understand yet. The understanding came in stages, each stage worse than the one before, the way large bad things reveal themselves. But because the engines had stopped, and the engine stopping was information, Was the ship telling you that the ordinary conditions of the crossing no longer applied? And the only reasonable response to that information was to be dressed and upright rather than horizontal in a nightgown. You went into the corridor. The corridor had the quality of a place in the process of becoming something it had not been before. People emerging from cabins in various states of dress and understanding. The murmur of voices, the particular social performance of people trying to assess the severity of a situation by reading the faces of people who might know more than they do. A steward passed, moving with controlled speed, his face arranged in the expression of a man delivering a message he has been told to deliver calmly, and who is delivering it calmly, by force of professional will. He said, "A small precaution. Please put on your life belt. Please make your way to the boat deck when you are ready." You looked at his eyes when he said this. You put on your life belt. You thought of your family. You had a letter, half written in the inner pocket of your coat. A letter you had been composing since the third day, that you had been adding to in the evenings before bed. The kind of letter that travels between people who have things to say to each other that the business of daily life keeps pushing to later. You put your hand on the coat pocket and felt the letter there, and you thought, I should have sent it from Queenstown. I should have sent it from the wireless room. The wireless room. You went to the wireless room. You do not know what you thought you would accomplish. Some instinct toward connection, toward reaching out in the direction of the people the letter was addressed to. The need to say, I am here. I am thinking of you. This is where I am. You climbed to the boat deck, and you found the wireless room, and you knocked and opened the door, and the operator inside. Young, very young, 20 or 21. But his face carrying a kind of compressed urgency that had no room in it for anything peripheral. Looked at you from behind his headphones, and his expression was the expression of a man for whom every second of the next hour is already spoken for. He said without removing his headphones, I cannot take passenger messages right now, sir. Please go to the boat deck. You stood in the doorway for a moment. Behind him, through the partition, you could hear the key. Not his key, another key. The rhythmic clicking of Morse code being sent with a speed and intensity that communicated its own urgency, that told you everything the operator's words had left out. The sound of the key was the sound of a man speaking as fast as he could into the largest silence imaginable, sending words out into the dark with everything he had. You looked at the operator. He was already back at his receiver, headphones on, pencil moving. You closed the door. You put your hand on the coat pocket with the letter in it. You went to the boat deck. You never sent the letter. It is in your coat pocket right now, on the Carpathia's deck. The paper slightly damp from the water, the ink still legible. You checked it when they pulled you out of the lifeboat. You checked it before anything else. The people it was written to are going to receive it in New York, and they are going to read it, and they are going to understand that you were thinking of them in the last ordinary hour of the crossing, before everything changed. That is not nothing. It is not nothing at all. The boat deck of the Titanic at midnight is lit as if it is daytime. All the ship's lights are on. Every lamp, every electric bulb in every fitting on every deck, the full illumination of a vessel that is still running its generators with complete efficiency. The brilliance of the Titanic at night, a thing that will be remarked upon by every person in the lifeboats as they pull away. The ship glowing on the dark water like something that cannot possibly be about to disappear. You stepped through the door onto the boat deck, and the cold hit you like a physical thing. Not the cold of the ship's exterior, which you had felt on deck walks in the previous days, but a deeper cold. A cold that the flat, calm night had been accumulating. That settled into your coat and threw it into your skin with a directness that told you the ship's heating had been keeping something very serious at bay for 4 days, and the bay was no longer being kept. You stood for a moment and looked. The deck was filling. People arriving in the irregular stream of a building evacuation, from staircases and doorways and hatches, in all states of readiness. Some in full coats with bags, some in nightclothes with life belts worn over them, some apparently having paused to dress formally, as if this were another kind of occasion, as if the habit of appearing correctly dressed in public spaces had survived the context that made it necessary. You saw a man in white tie near the forward davits, standing with his hands in his pockets and his cigar at a precise angle, and a look on his face that was the look of a man who has made a decision and is at peace with it. And there was something in his stillness, the specific stillness of someone who has gone past the point of agitation into something on the other side of it, that made you look at him for longer than the moment required. He did not look back at you. He was looking at the ocean. The officers were at the boats, the davits being freed, the canvas covers coming off, the wooden hulls of the lifeboats swinging out over the water. You watched an officer at the nearest boat directing the loading with a speed and firmness that contained within it the specific quality of a man who is doing the hardest version of his job, who is making decisions that cannot be unmade, who is counting and calculating and maintaining the expression of someone who knows what the numbers say and has decided that the expression must not show it. His voice when he called out, "Women and children, step forward, women and children only," carried across the deck with a clarity that cut through the noise of the crowd and the creaking of the davits and the distant music that you could hear somewhere below. The orchestra still playing, a sound so incongruous with everything else on the deck that it took you several seconds to believe it was real. The orchestra was still playing. You stood on the deck of the sinking Titanic, and you listened to the orchestra playing somewhere below you, and the music was... You could not have said what it was at the time. You could not have named it. But you recognized it the way you recognize music that has been in you for a long time. Music that has somehow gotten into the body rather than just the ears. The melody of it. The specific sadness of it. Played with a fullness and a completeness that suggested the musicians understood what they were doing. Understood that this was the last time, and were playing as if that mattered. As if the quality of the final note was as important as the quality of the first. You listened. You let yourself listen for 30 seconds. Then you moved toward the boats. You remember thinking as you moved through the crowd on the boat deck that the two things, the music and the cold and the lifeboats going over the side, should not be able to exist simultaneously. That the mind should not be able to hold them at the same time. The beauty and the terror, the melody from below, and the arithmetic of the boats above. But the mind held them. The mind held all of it, everything at once. The way the night held the stars and the sinking ship and the flat black water, all of it present, all of it real, none of it canceling the rest out. You went below once, after you had found your place in the queue for the boats. The officer at your boat told you to wait. There were women and children still to load. Wait, and you would be called. You went below once, back down the stairwell you had come up, because you had left something in the cabin. Not something important. Something that your hands went for without your mind's permission. The automatic reach for a familiar object. The instinct of a person whose body does not yet fully believe the situation it is in. The stairwell going down was a different stairwell from the one you had come up. You were on D-deck when you heard them. In the corridor to the left, not the main corridor, a side passage, a part of the ship you did not know well, a sound, not words. Not, and the sound that a small child makes when they have been woken and are frightened and are trying very hard not to cry because the person holding them is trying very hard not to be frightened, and children, even very young children, take their cues from the person holding them and try to give back what they are given. You heard that sound and you turned. The woman was in the corridor with the child in her arms. The child from F-deck. The sleeping child. The girl of 3 or 4 with the slack, soft face of deep sleep. She was not sleeping now. She was awake and her face was pressed against her mother's shoulder, and her eyes were open and looking at the wall with the wide, not quite focused look of a child who is awake but not yet fully in the world. The mother was moving quickly, purposefully, the child on her hip and a bag in her other hand and her life belt on over her coat. She moved with the direction of someone who knows where she is going and is going there without allowing herself to think about the alternative. She saw you, she said. Which way to the boat deck? You told her. She said, thank you. She moved past you and up the corridor toward the stairwell you had indicated, the child's hand over her shoulder. The small fingers curled loosely in the way of a child who trusts completely the person carrying them, who has handed the whole enormous fact of the situation over to the adult and is simply going where the adult goes. You watched them go. You got what you came for. You went back up. You do not know what happened to them. You do not know if she found the stairwell, if the stairwell was clear, as if she reached the boat deck in time, if there was a place for her in a boat. You told her which way. You gave her the direction. What happened after the direction? Whether it was enough, whether the corridor was clear, whether the boat still had room, is something you will not know, and the not knowing is something you will carry alongside the other things you carry. The particular weight of the things that were left unresolved at the end of the night. The officer at your boat is young, younger than you would have imagined for the man who has been given this particular job on this particular night. The job of putting people into wooden boats and sending them down to the water, and maintaining the process with enough calm authority that the people being put into the boats do not realize, or do not realize too quickly, the full weight of what is happening. He looks like a man in his mid-20s long. His face the face of someone who is holding something very still on the inside so that everything on the outside can function. You have seen this expression before, on people in difficult situations. The expression of a deliberate and maintained composure, and you recognize it because you are attempting the same thing with your own face. He is counting. Every few seconds, but his eyes move around the boat and count. The specific, efficient inventory of a man who knows the numbers and is comparing what he has to what is possible. The boat fills. When your turn comes, the officer looks at you and nods, and you step forward, and a crew member takes your arm and helps you into the boat, which is swinging slightly against the hull in a way that requires the specific physical attention of a person boarding a moving thing, and you find a seat on the thwart, and you sit, and the cold of the wooden seat comes up through your coat, and the cold of the night air comes down from above, and you are in the boat. You look up at the deck. The officer is still there, still counting, still loading, his voice carrying the same level authority it has carried since you arrived at this station. The same words: step forward, mind the gap, sit down, repeated with a steadiness that is the steadiness of a person who has decided that steadiness is the most useful thing he can offer, and is offering it completely, without reservation, holding nothing back. The boat begins to descend. The ropes run through the davits and the boat drops in stages, and the deck above you rises, or you fall away from it, the perspective shifting as the lifeboat goes down. And the officer's face gets smaller, and then the faces of the people still on the deck get smaller, and then the rail of the boat deck is above you, and you are alongside the hull, the rivets of the Titanic's side debassing at eye level, the portholes of the lower decks sliding past, some of them lit, some dark, the waterline coming up to meet you. You look up one more time. The officer is still there, and he is already moving to the next boat. The boat touches the water. The ropes go slack. Someone takes up the oars. You are on the ocean now. Not on the ship, on the ocean itself. The black surface of the North Atlantic, underneath the hull of the lifeboat. And the Titanic is above you and around you. still enormous, still lit, still the largest thing in the world. But you are no longer inside her. You are outside. And outside is cold and dark and very, very quiet compared to everything that was happening on the deck above. The person next to you takes an oar without being asked. You take one too. Not because you have been told to, not because rowing will make a meaningful difference to how quickly or slowly the boat moves across the flat water, but because the oar is something to hold and the holding of it is something to do, and right now the doing of something is the only way you know to stay inside yourself, to keep the animal part of your mind from taking over completely, from running the numbers that you are trying very hard not to run. You row. The Titanic recedes, not quickly, at the speed of human arms pulling oars in cold water, but steadily, the distance between you and the ship increasing with every stroke. The ship growing smaller, in the way that things grow smaller when you move away from them. At the ordinary physics of perspective, applying to the most extraordinary thing you have ever seen. She is still lit. Every light still burning. The 4 funnels still against the star-filled sky. The steam still coming from them. The ship still doing all the things a ship does, because the machinery is still working, because there are still men below who are keeping the machinery working, because the keeping of the machinery working is the only thing standing between the people in the boats and complete darkness. You think about that. You think about the men below, the engineers, the stokers, the men in the deepest and hottest parts of the ship who are down there right now, at this moment, keeping the lights on while you row away. You cannot know this for certain. You are in a lifeboat in the dark, and your knowledge of what is happening below the waterline is 0. But the lights are on. The lights are still on, and the lights are not on by accident. You row. Someone in the boat starts to pray. Not loudly, quietly, the words barely audible. The prayer of someone who has run out of other things to do and has reached for the oldest available thing. The thing that humans have been reaching for in the dark, for as long as there have been humans in the dark. The words rise from the boat and disappear into the cold air, but the saying of them does something to the boat, does something to the quality of the silence around the words. It holds the silence differently, makes it less empty. You row, the ship gets smaller. You do not look at it. You look at the water ahead of you, and you pull the oar through it, and you do not look back. You look back once. You cannot help it. The pull of it is too strong. The specific human impossibility of not looking at the thing that is ending behind you. You look back, and the Titanic is still there, still lit, still enormous, and she is tilted. The bow, lower than it was when you left the deck. The stern higher. The ship's angle wrong in a way that is visible, even at this distance. Visible and undeniable, and the single most frightening thing you have ever seen, because it is the evidence that what you have been trying not to fully believe is true. The largest ship in the world, the ship that nothing can happen to, she is going down. At 2:17 the lights go out. All of them, simultaneously, the entire ship going dark in a single moment. Not gradually, not deck by deck, not the way lights go out when someone turns them off one by one, but everything at once. The whole illuminated mass of the Titanic switching from full brilliance to complete darkness in the space of a breath. One moment she is there, every lamp burning, the most lit thing in the world on this dark ocean. The next moment she is not there, or rather she is there. You can still see the shape of her against the stars, the black mass of the hull and the funnels. But she is dark. She is only a shape now. She is the absence of the light rather than the light itself. The boat goes completely silent. The oars stop. Everyone stops. You have never heard silence like this. A silence that is not the absence of sound, but the presence of the full and complete cessation of something enormous. The silence that follows a thing ending. The silence that is the thing that comes after. The stars above the dark shape of the ship are extraordinary. are the brightest stars you have ever seen, are stars in their full and unfiltered reality. The Milky Way burning overhead with a coldness and a beauty that has no interest in what is happening on the surface of the ocean below it. Then, the sounds. You will not describe the sounds. You made that decision in the lifeboat, and it has held for years now. The decision not to describe them, not to give them to anyone who was not there, not to try to contain in language something that language was not built to contain. But you know what the sounds were. You know what they meant. They are yours, and they are the most private thing you own. More private than anything else in your life, before or since. You put the oar back in the water. The person next to you puts their oar back in the water, without speaking, without anyone giving the order. Everyone in the boat begins rowing again. Away. You row away from the sounds. You row until the sounds are behind you, and then until they are beneath you, and then until they are only in your memory, which is where they will be from now on. The ship goes under at 2:20. You feel it more than you see it. The specific disturbance of the water, as 46,000 tons of steel finds its final resting place. The wave that is not a wave moving outward from where the ship was. They lifting the lifeboat gently and setting it down. And then the water is still again, flatter than before. And the shape that was the Titanic is not there anymore. And the stars that were behind the funnels are just stars again. And the North Atlantic, which has been here for 100 million years, and which has seen things beyond counting, is simply the North Atlantic again. Dark and cold and completely indifferent. You wait. This is the part that does not make it into the accounts in the way it should. The waiting. The hours between the ship going under and the Carpathia arriving. The specific quality of those hours, which are among the longest hours you have ever experienced, and which contain a kind of time that is different from ordinary time, that does not move at the normal rate, but has its own pace, its own weight. The pace of hours that have nothing in them except the cold and the dark and the silence and the specific task of staying alive by not giving in to any of the things that want you to stop. The cold in the second hour is not the cold of the first hour. In the first hour, the cold was something you were managing, an external condition, something happening to the surface of you, something you were aware of and compensating for by keeping your hands moving and your core still, and your mind on the oar. In the second hour, the cold has moved inside the management, has gotten underneath the compensation, has settled into the places where your body keeps its reserves and is working through them with the steady, unhurried patience of something that has all the time in the world and knows it. Your hands are clumsy on the oar. The person next to you is shaking. Not dramatically, the fine, constant tremor of a body in the early stages of hypothermia. The muscles generating heat because the muscles are the last thing available to generate heat, and they have been doing it for 2 hours, and they are beginning to run out of the resources the generation of heat requires. You put your arm around them. Not a gesture, not a comfort, a practical decision. Body heat, the only warmth available, is the warmth of other bodies, and you share it. They lean into you. You lean into the cold. People in the boat talk sometimes. Not about what happened, not directly, not yet, that comes later. In weeks and months and years when there is enough distance to make looking at it possible. They talk about small things. Someone mentions a city. Someone mentions a name. Someone says, "My sister is waiting in Boston, she doesn't know." The conversations have the quality of talk that is happening because silence is worse, because the human need to speak is also the human need to exist, and as long as someone is speaking, you are all still here. You talk. You do not remember what you said. You talk because it keeps you in the world. Somewhere in the third hour, someone says, "There." To the east at the horizon, a light, moving, coming toward you, and, for a moment, nobody breathes. the collective suspension of a group of people who have been hoping for a specific thing for 3 hours, and are now looking at the thing, and cannot yet allow themselves to believe it is the thing, because believing it and being wrong is a cruelty the body cannot absorb right now. Then it fires a rocket, and then another, and the rockets go up over the horizon, and they are the most beautiful things you have ever seen. Those rockets, 2 red arcs of light rising and falling over the dark water, and the boat erupts. Not with cheering exactly, with something that comes before cheering, the specific sound of people releasing something they have been holding for 3 hours. And you make that sound with them, and the Carpathia comes. The rope ladder is rough under your hands. Your hands are cold enough that the rope registers as pressure rather than texture. You can feel the weight of it, the resistance of it. But the specific roughness of the hemp is beyond what your nerve endings can report at this temperature. You climb anyway. The hands grip without feeling, and the arms pull, and you go up rung by rung, the black hull of the Carpathia beside you. The water getting further below, the deck getting closer above, and you climb until hands reach over the rail and take hold of you and lift you, and you are on the deck of another ship. You are standing on a deck that is level, properly level, the way a deck is supposed to be, the way you had forgotten a deck could be. And you are alive. They put a blanket around your shoulders. Someone gives you hot coffee. The cup is so warm against your palms that the sensation of it is almost painful. The warmth finding nerve endings that have been numb and waking them up. The specific piercing quality of warmth returning to cold tissue. An ache and a relief simultaneously. You drink it with both hands around the cup, and the heat moves from your hands into your wrists and from your wrists toward your core, and you feel, very slowly, the cold beginning to retreat to the places it came from. The deck of the Carpathia fills, survivor after survivor coming up the rope ladders, being received by the Carpathia's crew with blankets and coffee, and the specific professional tenderness of people who have been doing this for hours, and who have not stopped being moved by it, who receive each person with the same care as the first. You watch them come. You find a place at the rail and you watch the lifeboats arrive and the people climb up and you look for faces. The faces you accumulated over 4 days on the Titanic. The faces you can remember from the corridors and the dining rooms and the deck and the places you passed through and the moments you collected. You look for the woman and the child. The boats come in one by one and you watch the faces and you look for them. You do not find them on the first boat or the second or the third. On the 4th boat, you see them. The woman, still in her coat, the child on her hip, awake now the child, looking around at the Carpathia's deck, with the wide-eyed concentration of a child encountering something completely new. And the woman's face when she reaches the top of the ladder, and someone takes the child from her, and she sets her feet on the deck. Her face does a thing that you watch from the rail, and that you do not forget. That you carry with you, as one of the things that the night gave you, alongside everything it took. The expression of a person who has arrived somewhere she was not certain she would arrive, whose body understood before her mind caught up that she is here, that the child is here, that they are both here on this deck, in this cold gray morning light. You look away. The moment is not yours, but you looked for them, and you found them, and the finding of them does something to the place inside you, where the questions live, does not answer the questions. The questions do not get answered, not today. Not for a long time, but does something to the quality of the weight they carry. The last boat comes in at 8:30 in the morning, 710 people. The Carpathia's captain walks the deck and the survivor's deck, and after a time, he gives the order and the ship begins to move. Begins the journey back toward New York with its cargo of the living, and the debris field of the Titanic is left behind, and the North Atlantic is as flat and cold and indifferent as it has been all night. And the sun is up now, fully up, the gray turned to pale gold, and you are standing at the stern watching the water, watching the place where the ship was, watching the last of the debris catch the light. You are sitting with your back against the funnel casing, the warmth of it at your back, the blanket around your shoulders, the coffee cup, empty now in your hands. The sun is up. Around you on the Carpathia's deck, the 710 are beginning the slow process of becoming people again. The process of eating and sleeping and speaking and moving and doing all the things that people do when they are no longer required to do only the thing that survival requires. It is a slow process. It will be a slow process for a long time. Some of them will spend the rest of their lives finishing it. You are finishing it right now. Or rather, you are starting to finish it. The finishing of it is going to take years. The finishing of it is going to happen in increments so small that on most days you will not be able to detect any movement. At any progress, any narrowing of the distance between who you were on the dock at Southampton and who you are here, on this deck, watching the Atlantic go by. But you are starting. This is the first morning. You think about everything you remember. The man in the first-class dining room watching his wife laugh. The pianist in the empty lounge. The woman and the child in the corridor. The captain's eyes in the passage after the Sunday service. The wireless room and the key and the sound of someone sending a message as fast as they could into the dark. The officer at the boat, counting. The man in white tie with his cigar, standing still on the deck and looking at the ocean with that particular stillness on his face. The stillness of someone who has come to terms with something. You think about the music, at the melody that you heard through the first-class lounge doorway on the second evening. Gentle, unhurried, a tune that had no particular origin, that might have been composed or might have been found in the moment. You have been carrying it for 4 days. It is still there, somewhere in the body, in the place where music lives when it has gotten past the ears and into something deeper. You hold it. You let it run. The Atlantic is very blue in the morning light. The Carpathia is moving west. You are moving west with it, toward New York, toward whatever comes after New York, toward the rest of a life that you did not know 36 hours ago you were going to have. You have it. The question, why you, why not them, is still there. It will be there tomorrow. And it will be there in New York and in the years after New York and in the mornings when you wake before light and the night comes back in the specific way that nights like this one come back, with a completeness and a clarity that ordinary nights do not. The question will be there, and it will not have an answer, and you will carry it the way you carry the letter, in your coat pocket, the way you carry the melody, the way you carry the faces. But you are here. The sun is on the water. The water is very blue. A note of history. 710 people survived the sinking of the RMS Titanic. 1,517 did not. The Carpathia, commanded by Captain Arthur Rostron, received the Titanic's distress signal at 12:20 a.m. on April 15th and arrived at the debris field at 4:10 a.m. She had traveled 58 miles at full speed through ice-filled water in complete darkness, Rostron having made the decision to proceed at maximum speed without reducing for the ice risk, because the alternative was arriving too late to save anyone. His navigation was flawless. He found the lifeboats in the dock using dead reckoning and a combination of the Titanic's last known position and his own calculation. The Carpathia collected the last lifeboat at 8:30 a.m. and arrived in New York on the evening of April 18th. At the 710 survivors arrived in heavy rain to a crowd estimated at 30,000 people. Many of them had not been able to send word that they were alive. The wireless traffic on the Carpathia was overwhelmed with official messages, and personal communications were restricted. Families waiting on the pier did not know until the gangplank went down whether the person they were waiting for was among the living. The survivors' experiences after the sinking varied enormously. Some gave extensive testimony, at the American and British inquiries and spoke publicly about the disaster for the rest of their lives. Others never spoke about it at all, or spoke about it only once, or spoke about specific parts of it, while keeping other parts entirely private. And the psychological impact of surviving the Titanic, what we would now call post-traumatic stress, was not recognized as a clinical condition in 1912, and most survivors received no treatment for it. Many reported difficulty sleeping, intrusive memories, and a persistent inability to fully re-enter ordinary life for months or years after the disaster. The question of survivor guilt, why me, why not them, appears in many of the survivor accounts, sometimes explicitly and sometimes in the way that large unspoken things appear in the margins of what people choose to say. Several survivors reported feeling that they had not done enough, that they should have done more, that the fact of their survival required a justification they could not provide. Others reported the opposite, a gratitude so overwhelming that it was itself a kind of grief, and the impossible task of holding thankfulness and loss in the same body at the same time. The characters who appear in this story as glimpsed figures: the first-class passenger watching his wife, the pianist in the lounge, the mother and child in the corridor, the captain after Sunday service, the wireless operator at his key, the officer at the boat, the man in white tie with his cigar, are versions of the people who appear in the other chapters of this series. Their stories are told in those chapters. This chapter belongs to the one who saw them briefly and carried the seeing forward into the rest of a life. The letter in the coat pocket is fictional. The impulse it represents, the need to say the thing to the people you love, before it is too late, the half-finished message, the meaning to get to it, is not fictional at all. And in the survivor accounts and in the letters written from the Carpathia and in the testimonies given in the weeks after, this appears again and again. People who sent word in time and people who didn't. People who said the thing and people who were still meaning to. The Titanic sank at 2:20 a.m. on April 15, 1912. The sun rose over the North Atlantic at approximately 5:30 a.m. 710 people watched it come up. This series has followed them through the dark. This is where the dark ends. Good night.